Hey, let's get that door closed, please. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you. Today is Advaita Saptami. Saptami is the seventh day. There's 15 days in the time it takes for the moon to become full. And so each one of them has a name. So just a couple days ago we celebrated Vasant Panchami. Vasant means spring. And Panchami is the fifth day, like Panchatattva. So Vasant Panchami. And then Shasti is the next day, and then Saptami is the next day after that. So Advaita appeared on the seventh day. Jamashtami, the eighth day. Ram Navami, ninth day. Ekadasi, the 11th day. Varahadvadasi, the 12th day. Nityananda Trayodasi is the 13th day. Nishringa Chaturdasi is the 14th day. And then Gaur Purnima is the 15th day, the full moon day. Amavas is the dark moon day. So for 15 days, the moon gets bigger. For 15 days, it gets smaller. And so when we're celebrating a day, it's usually the name of the deity. And then it's also, you include the day in the calendar that it occurs on. It's also called Advaita's Avirbhav, which means his appearance day. The Tirobhav and Avirbhav, disappearance and appearance days. So, Dashera is from Dasami. The celebration, oftentimes the killing of Ravan, happened on the 10th day. So Dasami gets shortened to Dashera, and that's celebrated on that day. I was trying to think of one that happened on that day. I have a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that I thought we would use as a springboard for what we're going to talk about today. The verse is Advaitam Hodinadvaitat Acharya Bhakti Sangshanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye. So when you want to say something fancy, you make a Sanskrit verse, and then you're really codifying it for posterity's sake, because people can remember it. Advaitam Harinadvaitat Acharyam Bhakti Sangshanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye. I kind of butchered that. Let me do it one more time. Advaitam Harinadvaitat Acharyam Bhakti Sangshanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye. It's like a verse, you can memorize it. 4 lines, 8 syllables to a line, and you can memorize it. That's what our tradition does when they want to really commit something to memory. So this is a chapter of a book. It's the 6th chapter of the Adi Leela, the first book of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And the whole chapter is dedicated to Advaita. There's like maybe 130 verses or something like that. But he starts off, he also has a song. He starts off with a little song you can sing. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So he starts off with a song that you can sing, and then he has a formal Sanskrit verse that he composes. And that verse is then explored over about 120 verses in Bengali. But they all really relate back to this verse and one other verse. I picked this one. I think it encapsulates what we want to discuss today quite nicely. So who is Advaita? Advaita, you know the word duo or duet? That's from dvi. Dvi in Sanskrit means two. So Advaita means Dvaita, it means dual. Dvi means two, but Dvaita means dual. Advaita, just like atheist is the opposite of a theist, Advaita means non-dual. Advaitam, so non-different than. Hodina. Hodina means with Hari. Non-different than Hari, or non-different with Hari, not different with God. Advaitam Hodinadvaitat. So he's known as Advaita because Hodina, with Hari, Advaitat, from being non-different than Hari. From being non-different than Hari, he's known as Advaitam. So why is Advaita known as Advaita? Because he's non-different than God, which is really a way of saying he's God. You follow? Point number one. He's non-different than God. Okay? And therefore he's known as non-different. It's pretty simple, right? I mean, that's literally Advaitam Hodina Advaitat. Advaitat means from being non-different than Hari, therefore known as Advaita. Acharya. Acharya means one who practices. Char means to practice. Achar means behavior. Acharya means one who behaves properly. It is a formal nomenclature, an honorific formal word for a teacher. Like a heavy word for a teacher is called an acharya. An acharya is it's like a very formal honorific given to a teacher. It literally means one who behaves properly. But functionally it means the head of an institution, the head of a lineage. And so therefore we say acharya means one who teaches by example. They practice, and their practice is their teaching. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you're saying." He's a famous American author. Actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent a book to him. He sent the book Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts, to Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote back to him and said, "I'm sorry I don't read Bengali, but thank you very much for the book." It had a foreword to it. I wish he'd read the foreword. Anyway, but they had a letter exchange. 100 and some odd years ago, 150 years ago, they had a letter exchange. Crazy. I mean, if you're not from this country, Ralph Waldo Emerson's name isn't super duper familiar. But for anybody with even a reasonable education in the U.S., Ralph Waldo Emerson is one of the most famous American authors. He's like a Mark Twain level of fame. Anyway, so Acharya means like the formal head of, like a temple president, the proper name is Mahant. He's like the head of the temple. Acharya, the head of a line. So Acharya Bhakti Sangshanat. From teaching or propagating or spreading bhakti. Sangsana. Then he's known as Acharya. So he's got two names, Advaita Acharya. Actually, his birth name was Kamalaksha, like Kamala Harris. I don't know how she pronounced her name. How she pronounce her name? She says Kamala? Yeah. So Kamala is a name. It's actually a neutered name or a masculine name. It's used equally for both women and men. Kamala. And so some words like that are like that in Sanskrit. They get used for both women and men, right? And so Kamalaksha means lotus-eyed. So Advaita's birth name was Kamalaksha. He was also known as Mangala. Mangala means auspicious, like Mangalarti, the auspicious arti. So his name was Mangal. His birth name was Kamalaksha. But he became known as Advaita Acharya. In Bengali, Advaita. Advaita. And so, anyway, so Advaitam Hodinadvaitat Achayam Bhakti Sangshanat. From teaching bhakti or spreading bhakti, he's known as the Acharya, and because he's non-different from the Lord, he's known as Advaita. That's his name. So we got 2 points about his 2 names, right? Then there's a third point. Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam. He is the Lord. Isha means Lord. Bhaktavataram Isham Tvam. He is the Lord, and he's Bhakta Avatar. Bhakta Avatar becomes Bhakta Avatar. It becomes a long word. Bhakta Avatar. You follow? Alright. So, Avatar means one who crosses down. Ava means down, and tar means to cross. So, Avatar in Sanskrit means one who crosses down. Someone from heaven. The Lord or an angel coming from heaven is called an avatar. So he is Bhakta Avatar. He's Bhakta Avatar. Bhakta Avatar. The 2 A's become long. The short A from Bhakta and the short A from Avatar becomes Bhakta Avatar. Bhakta Avatar. Like the devotee Bhakta Avatar. So he's Bhakta Avatar. He's the incarnation of a Bhakta. This is actually a third point. He's non-different from the Lord, therefore his name is Advaita. He teaches bhakti, spreads bhakti, bhakti sankshana. Therefore his name is Acharya. And he has another honorific because he's the incarnation of a devotee, and therefore he's known as Bhaktavatar. There's a verse about the Panchatattva. Panchatattva makam krishnam bhakta rupa surupakam bhaktavataram bhaktakyam namami bhakta shaktikam. Advaita's name in this Bhakta Rupa is Chaitanya, Bhakta Swarup is Nityananda, Bhakta Avatar is Advaita. And then Bhaktakyam, they're known as a Bhakti. They're known as a Bhakta, that's Srivas. And then Bhakti Shakti. That's Bhakti Shakti is Gadadhar, Radharani, the feminine. So, in the Panchatattva shlok, in this verse about the Panchatattva, again, another formal Sanskrit verse that we find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, glorifying all 5 members of the Panchatattva. This verse, I believe, first occurs in the Gorga Nadesh Deepika that was written about 50 years prior by Kavi Karnapur. I named my son after him. He was a very, very important early Gaudiya author. He's the earring. He's the earring of the Karnapur. Napur means ornament. Karnapur. Napur means like Pur means it fills. So he fills your ears. He's the ornament, the ear filler of the poets. He has the most beautiful poetry to fill your ears with. So 3 things. Advaita Acharyam Ashraya. I take shelter of, I surrender to Advaita Acharya. That's the last line. So it's a verse where you're offering your obeisance, you're offering your surrender, you're taking shelter of Advaita Acharya. It's a prayer, actually. I offer my obeisances. I surrender to Narshingam Adim Shadanam Prapadye. I'm approaching the Sringadev for shelter. So it's the same idea. It's the same kind of verse. Advaita Acharyam Ashraya. I'm taking shelter of. Ashraya means shelter. I'm trying to think of a word where we use Ashraya. Bhagavat Ashraya. We have all sorts of words we use, but I'm trying to think of one you guys would know. Huh? No. Actually, ashram might be from ashray. It might be a place where you go to take shelter. I'm almost certain it is, now that I come to think of it. I have to look it up to be 100% sure, but just because of the words in that verbal root, ashray, ashritya, ashram, ashram must be a place where people take shelter. It's a place where you go to sleep, where you go to take shelter from the storm. Yeah, excellent. All right, look at that. I learned something today. Sadhu, sadhu. Advaitam, Hodinadvaitat, Acharya Bhakti Sangshanat, Bhaktavatarami Shantam, Advaita Acharyam Ashraya. It's a pretty easy one, isn't it? You could learn this. Yeah, a few minutes you could learn it. I learn it every year and then forget it. It's easy. It takes a minute or two to learn. Because so many of the words are familiar to you already. So there's really 3 points to make here. Who is Advaita Acharya? Some people say Shiva. You ever heard that from before? Only real Hare Krishnas. None of you fake Hare Krishnas would have heard that. If you go if you kind of do your rounds in the Hare Krishna movement, and somebody spits that out at you, it's not true. He's not Shiva. Not according to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, not according to the Gorgonadesh Deepika, not according to the core text. His lineage says he's Shiva. And there is a verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that speaks about him dancing and singing, and then there's another verse, a couple of verses apart, that talks about Shiva dancing and singing. But then another verse talks about so many demigods dancing and singing, so it'd be hard to make that point. One of Advaita Acharya's names is Sadashiva, which makes people think, okay, that's the eternal Shiva that exists in the Paravyom, in the spiritual sky. I don't want to get into a whole thing on Shiva, but there's Shiva in the spiritual world and there's Shiva in this world. Shiva in this world is a demigod. Shiva in the spiritual world is a great eternal manifestation of the Lord. However, that's not Advaita. Advaita is a cowherd boy named Sadashiva. Sadashiva means ever auspicious. So there's a cowherd boy named Sadashiva, and Advaita is that cowherd boy. Now you could say that cowherd boy is the original prototype of Shiva, and so Shiva is an incarnation of that cowherd boy. You could say that. There's just nobody ever said it, except for me right now. But it works with the name, and so that might be where they get it from. Like I said, Advaita has a lineage coming off of him. Advaita has a lineage coming off him through his son Achyutananda, primarily. There's other sons too. But there's an Advaita Vangsha in Bengal, primarily. In Bengal, there are hundreds of thousands of Vaishnavas who trace themselves to Advaita Acharya through Diksha, through initiation. And there's entire villages all over West Bengal where at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of traditional Gaudiyas who were born into our religion, they link themselves through the Advaita Vangsha, the family of Advaita, through his sons and their initiates. In fact, for example, Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, in our lineage, the guru of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, is in the Advaita Vangsha. Which means we're in the Advaita Vangsha, because he's the person we're connected to through initiation. So actually our lineage is through the Advaita Vangsha. Now Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in the Nityananda Vangsha. It's another major lineage. These are the two major lineages. There's other ones, but these are the two main ones. Advaita and Nityananda and their descendants. They're the two main branches of the Chaitanya tree. And most people can trace their gurus back to one of these two personalities. Do you know that? So, Sadashiva, you knew that? I don't believe you. Huh? You read it in the CC? What I said is not in the CC. Two branches? Yes. I said many things. That was one thing I said. When you nod your head, then it means you've read every single thing I said, which you could not have read. I understand. It's a cultural thing. If you ask an American, did you understand? They'll go, no, yeah, I understood. If you ask an Indian, have you understood? They'll say, yes, yes. Then you go, what did you understand? He goes, nothing. But you asked me and I did not want to be rude to you, so I said yes. But as a teacher, I want to have some value. Teachers want to have value to the people they teach. Therefore, I want to know if you're learning something from me or if I'm merely repeating something you already knew. That there were millions of Vaishnavas in Bengal, that everyone can trace their lineage back to Advaita Nityananda, that Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj was initiated in the Advaita Vangsha. You could not have known this. So I taught you something. So much. It's okay. Now I just want to make sure we're all following. You see, you have to be careful. Sometimes people say, I already know, because they have an ego. But sometimes people say yes, yes, because they want to be respectful. You have to be able to distinguish between the two. So you know whether to give them a clap on the back or a slice on the neck. Which one they deserve. You get a clap on the back. If you really want to understand the way to Acharya, you have to understand three things. And this whole chapter that I'm just going to paraphrase for you is dedicated to 3 points. Most people don't notice that the verse actually has 3 points, not 2. They miss the Bhaktavataram Isham Tavam, which says that he's the incarnation of a devotee. And they just catch that he's non-different from the Lord and he preaches. But being the incarnation of a devotee, that's actually a 3rd point that most people don't notice. And the whole rest of the chapter, if you understand these 3 points, this single verse becomes 120 verses. All 120 verses are a purport to this verse, actually. If you understand that, you can study so much more effectively. The chapter will come to life for you, and you'll see what people don't see. You'll be able to enter into the chapter. So there's 3 things you got to understand about Advaita. And they are these 3 points. So let's start with the easiest one to understand. Point number 1. Advaita is a guru who has a lineage coming from him. He walked in this world and made disciples. He preached bhakti. If he could not explain the Gita and convince someone of bhakti, then he would fast that day. He was an incredibly pure Brahmana, but he was not interested in Brahmanism. In In fact, when his father passed away, he was the biggest Brahmin. He was the biggest Brahmin. And he lived in a place called Shantipur, very, very close to Mayapur. And when his father passed away, he invited, what you do, you invite all the Brahmanas. He was the biggest Brahmana. So he'd invite all the Brahmanas and you feed them all. And one of the Brahmanas gets what's called the Shrad Patra, the funeral plate. Nothing from the actual funeral. That's like, there were sin eaters in Europe. You would offer bread to the corpse, and then there's somebody who would eat that bread, a very poor person, you give him some money, and he was the sin eater. That bread was thought to contain all the sins of the person who died, and that person ate their sins. A very low person, eating remnants from a funeral. It's like, makes me want to vomit. Like, if I go to a funeral, I stand outside my home on the street and bathe under a hose. You understand? I take a full bath in a hose in my driveway. I won't even enter my home after having attended a funeral. If there's a body of water nearby, I'll go jump in the ocean with all my clothes on. Everything gets washed. Not just me, but everything I'm wearing. Then I'll go home and take another shower. But I won't even enter my bathroom to bathe directly from a funeral. I'll take a bath outside. Funerals are like, if you're a Hindu man, funerals are like the worst thing ever. If I do your funeral, you know I really love you. I'm always trying to get out doing funerals. Like, I'll send this other Vaishnava. I mean, I know better Vaishnavas than me, so sometimes I also send a better Vaishnava. Like, I'll have somebody else to a wedding more qualified than me. But I'm always trying to get out of funerals. So, he was an Acharya. And when his father died, he invited all the Brahmanas to his home. And he picked one Brahmana out of all of them, and he gave them this special plate of food. And that Brahmana blesses your lineage. By eating that food, he blesses your whole family and cures you of the inauspicious. It's like a sin eater, but it's not actually from food you've waited a certain amount of days. Everybody takes bath to cleanse the whole home. You put cow dung all over the home, which is counterintuitive, but it purifies the home. And then you finally start cooking again after a couple of weeks. And then you do this Shrad ceremony after like a month or two. And then you invite this Brahmana, and he eats the Shrad Patra, and he blesses your family and kind of restores you guys. Patra means plate. It means leaf, but it means a plate in this context because leaf plates were what plates were made out of back in the day. So, who did he invite? Damodar? Come on. Shame on you. Who did he invite? He invited Haridas. Now, who's Haridas? Servant of Hari. Who else was Haridas? He was a Muslim who converted to our tradition. Back in the days when Hindus and Muslims were like oil and water. Put it this way, Haridas never entered the Jagannath temple. He never even tried because he was born in a Muslim family and he didn't want to try entering the Jagannath temple. He sat outside and would just take darshan of the flag and the chakra on top of the temple. You see that? His dead body, Mahaprabhu holding his divine form, and you can see in the background the spire of the Jagannath temple along with the flag. He would live there, out in the forest, and just look at the top of the temple. He would only see Jagannath during the Rath Yatra on the road. He never even tried to enter the temple. Of course, the temple came to him. Mahaprabhu came to him and sat with him while he left this world. So, Advaita invited Haridas, a born Muslim, to be the chief priest at the passing away of his father. This is like a massive social protest. You have to really understand Hindu culture in that milieu, in that time period, to appreciate. It would be like inviting like somebody, like a Muslim jihadist, to speak at like a Jewish gathering. Something like this. It was like so crazy. It would be like if a Muslim jihadist had killed so many Jews and then converted to Judaism, and he was offered to be like the leader, the head rabbi of like the biggest synagogue in the whole world, like at the main temple in Jerusalem. Does that make sense? It'd be like electing a female pope. Like I have to come up with stuff that's not a direct corollary because you can't even appreciate like the ridiculousness of it. It would be like electing a female pope. It'd be like having a married pope, which they actually had at certain points. But the De Medici popes were like, a lot of them were married, had a bunch of kids, a bunch of different women. They were like some of the most debauched people in the history of the world. But it would be like having a married pope, a female pope. It's like, you understand? It's just like so over the top. It'd be like having one of the insurrectionists at the Capitol building become the chief of the Capitol Police. Just mind-bending. Advaita did that because he was a pure Vaishnava who preached pure Krishna bhakti. He was an ideal Acharya. Big Brahmin, huge lineage, millions of Vaishnavas that came from him. Huge leader, the most important person in his community, vastly learned and just a perfect Hare Krishna devotee. Advaita Acharya was an Acharya, walked this earth. He was a Vaishnava Acharya just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. You follow? But then that becomes a problem. We know where his house is, who his children were. You follow? That means he was just like us. He had a wife and children. He had a house. This devotee is disturbed. It's okay. I know that you're disturbed. Yes, you. It's okay. Be disturbed for a few minutes. I'm trying to disturb you. They just haven't caught up yet. He was a Vaishnava, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, just like Srila Prabhupada. What's the massive problem with that? Loud.
Advaita Acharya is also an incarnation of...
How can you be a Vaishnava and also be the Supreme Lord? You literally can't. Those two things are diametrically opposed. Srila Prabhupada would never say he was Krishna, would never say he was the Lord. He's an Acharya. Or you are the Lord, and then you perform pastimes of the Lord, but Advaita Acharya was fully an Acharya who has a birthplace and a place he lived and a house and family deities and family members and a wife and children and seminal descendants till this day. I think they're on their 14th generation. 13th or 14th generation. What do you do with that? You understand? He was also the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord he was Mahavishnu. The Mahavishnu from whom all the universes emanate from his pores. He's like at the top of the list. It's the Purusha avatar. The Supreme Lord from whom all the universes generate. How do you reconcile those two things? On one level, you don't. But both things are stated in the verse. You follow? Now, the first two, Advaitam Hodinadvaitat and Acharya Bhakti Samshanat, the Advaita and the Acharya, they are oxymoronic. They're a contradiction in terms. Perhaps you will find in the third statement a resolution that he was the avatar in the mood of a devotee. But to properly understand how that third line is a resolution of the first two, I need to take you down a little road. Our understanding of heaven. What does heaven look like for a Hare Krishna devotee? Quickly, in one paragraph or less. What's heaven look like for a Hare Krishna devotee? You should all be able to answer this question. If you can't, what the hell are you doing here? Get together, man. Answer the damn question. What is it? Loud.
Eternal service to Krishna.
Eternal service to Krishna. I mean, you can be a heck of a lot more explicit than that. That's pretty neutered. It's pretty generic. I'm going to give you like a D+, which means you passed, but like literally no one is going to want to hire you. Yeah?
Return home back to Godhead.
Return home back to Godhead. I don't know what that even means. I'm asking you to explain what heaven is like. Answer my question. There we go. Yes.
The forest where you're engaging personally and directly with God and his devotees.
Heaven is a forest where you live as a young boy or girl or an old man or woman, and you are Krishna's family and friends, and you hang out and spend time with Krishna in a pastoral setting where you don't even know Krishna's God. And heaven looks like an Indian village and the surrounding forests. No palaces, super simple, intimate devotion. That's Vrindavan. That's Braj Bhakti. Right? Is that what heaven looks like for us?
Yes.
Not quite. That's half of what heaven looks like for us. What's the other half of what heaven looks like for us?
Singing kirtan going on, devotees chanting.
Yes.
Where we can engage with Krishna in such a personal way that he forgets he's God.
No, that's the first half that she just said, that I articulated. How is that any different than what we already said?
Well, I thought the part where he forgets that he's God is different.
I said we forget that he's God and we love him.
Well, you said we forget, but Krishna actually forgets.
All right, fair enough. It's not where I was going, but okay. It wasn't terrible. We forget, he forgets. I can see that. All right, I get credit for that. Okay. All right. Yes. Yes. We believe that the soul manifests in two places simultaneously. And our conception of heaven is that heaven is an Indian village where you are, generally speaking, a young girl assisting Krishna in his pastimes that doesn't dance directly with Krishna, but that facilitates Krishna dancing with his girlfriends. And simultaneously, you become a Brahmin boy in Gaur Leela, and you spend time with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doing kirtan forever, and wandering around Navadvip and the forests and islands of Navadvip, and eating with Mahaprabhu, and dancing with him. And so heaven for us looks a heck of a lot like rural India thousands of years ago and rural Bengal 500 years ago. Why is that? Because a miracle happened 5 centuries ago. Krishna wondered what it would be like to be his own devotee, and so he came down with the complexion of Srimati Radharani, and he brought the spiritual world with him. And Mayapur, 500 years ago, was actually a facsimile of Vrindavan with the quality of Audarya or mercy added to it. So Navadvip isn't Navadvip. Bengali isn't Bengali. It's an import from the spiritual world. It's eternal. And Krishna injected it into time and space. to create a scaffolding where his pastimes could be manifest. And the same way we want to go back 5,000 years, we want to go back 500 years. And the soul does both things, and both things are the same. The Ras Leela becomes the Sankirtan movement. Krishna dancing with the gopis is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Vaishnavas doing kirtan with mridanga and kartals. Do you guys follow this? That's our conception. Therefore, Advaita coming and acting as an Acharya, he was. Just like Nanda Maharaj worshipped Narasimha. Just like the gopis worshipped Katyayani Devi. Just like Nanda Maharaj had his house. Just like all this, Advaita Acharya in Shantipur, acting as an Acharya, was actually in heaven performing a miraculous pastime that looks suspiciously like what goes on in this world. Which works out really nicely because it allows us to slide into divinity. God looks a lot like us, or rather, we look a lot like God. We are theomorphic more than Krishna's anthropomorphic. We have recursion, the ability to think about big subjects. That's because we were made in God's image, because we have the capacity to love God, and therefore we were made in His image. And therefore, by looking at ourselves, who we're uniquely endowed in this world as a species with the ability to wonder about and think about divinity, we find out something about the nature of divinity. And so Krishna doesn't have a human-like form. We have divine-like forms. Sometimes you just got to say it. You follow? This isn't for outsiders. Then it's like consciousness is irreducible, and you do that kind of stuff. But for our insiders, you got to be able to say it. Advaita was an Acharya, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was an Acharya. You follow? But he was in the spiritual world. He was an incarnation of a devotee. And when the Lord comes, it's like you'll find that pale rider. You know this four horsemen of the apocalypse. And on that horse rode a pale rider, and he brought hell with him. This is a statement from the Bible. You guys know this? And hell came with him. And so Mahaprabhu, when he came, he brought heaven with him. And Advaita Acharya was part of that. So, Advaita Acharya is an Acharya, not exactly like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Not quite. Because he was the Supreme Lord performing the pastime of being a devotee. He used to say, Chaitanya Das Mui, Chaitanya Das Mui, Chaitanya Das Mui. I am a servant of Chaitanya, I am a servant of Chaitanya, I am a servant of Chaitanya. Ta Dashara Das, a servant of his servants. He had this mood of Bhakta Bhav, the mood of being a devotee. Bhakta Abhiman, the self-conception of being a devotee that is more blissful and ecstatic than anything else in the world. Lakshmi Devi wants to become a Bhakta. She prays for bhakti. Even Radharani serves Krishna's feet. Balaram, even though he plays the role of Krishna's elder, in his heart he wants to serve Krishna. Advaita was respected by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being his elder. But sometimes he would preach Mayavad, so Mahaprabhu would come and chastise him. Mahaprabhu one time came and slapped Advaita Acharya for preaching Mayavad. And Advaita Acharya began to dance, and Mahaprabhu realized he tricked him. He felt very, very ashamed. Even Mahaprabhu, even Nanda Maharaj prays for attachment to his son's lotus feet. He doesn't know why, but everybody has this mood. Ekala Ishwar Krishna Sarvabhrita. Everybody has this mood of being Krishna's servant. He's the cynosure of everything. It's the sweetest mood that could possibly exist. Advaita is the Lord wanting that mood. He's Vishnu. Normally he comes and teaches Harinam Sankirtan, but in this Kali Yuga he thought, my dear Lord, I want Krishna himself to come. And so he didn't know what to do. He wanted to bring Krishna. Advaita is not Krishna. He's Vishnu. Vishnu is derivative of Krishna. Krishna is more than Vishnu. And so Vishnu came to preach Harinam Sankirtan, but he was filled with so much humility, he began to pray to Krishna himself to appear. He took tulsi and water, and he worshipped his Shalagram Shila, and he prayed to Krishna to appear. And Mahaprabhu appeared. And because Mahaprabhu came, instead of giving Harinam Sankirtan that takes you back to Vaikuntha, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave Prem Nam Sankirtan from Golok Air, Premadhan, Harinam Sankirtan. He gave the names of Krishna spoken in the spiritual world in Goloka Vrindavan. And because he was in the mood of Radharani, he gave Radharani's Prem. And that's why Gaudiyas in this day and age, in our tradition, follow in the wake of Radharani, follow in the wake of the residents of Vrindavan, and we become Brijbasis by the grace of Mahaprabhu, by the mercy of Advaita. Advaita prasadat loka tarila. By his mercy, he liberated the world. With Prem Sankirtan, loka tarila. He liberated the world with Prem Sankirtan. Advaita prayed for Krishna to come, and at that moment Krishna was thinking, what would it be like to feel like Radharani does? And presto, Mahaprabhu appeared. And he did Advaita's job better than Advaita could. And that's why this Kali Yuga is special. And Mahaprabhu brought heaven with him, and Advaita was part of that. But heaven looks a lot like the Hare Krishna movement. I mean, if heaven didn't look a lot like the Hare Krishna movement, I would be disturbed. If there wasn't wonderful kirtan going on in the spiritual world, I would be disturbed. You follow? Krishna, he says Dharadhara. He prays to the earth. Dharadhara, Dharadhara, Dharadhara. Dharadhara means the holder of the earth. Dhara means earth. Dharadhara, the holder of the earth. He prays to the earth like this, to the Lord who holds up the earth. But Dharadhara, can you see what it becomes? Dharadhara, Dharadhara, Dharadhara becomes Radha, 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 Radha. Just like Mara, 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 Mara becomes Ram, Ram, Ram. And so Krishna himself chants Radharani's name in the spiritual world. We also chant Radharani's name. Hare is Radharani's name. It's most of the mantra. Half the mantra is Radharani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in the mood of Radharani. He brought the spiritual world with him. Advaita Acharya was the original Bhakta avatar. Mahaprabhu is the Bhakta Rupa, the form of a Bhakta. And then Advaita is the Bhakta avatar. Of course, Mahaprabhu was also Bhakta avatar. He also was a Bhakta who came down. But this little slight difference in language is given. And so Advaita is Mahavishnu. He's a cowherd boy in the spiritual world as well. Advaita said, no matter who you worship, Narasimha, Varaha, doesn't matter. If you worship Mahaprabhu too, you'll get a form in Vrindavan. Mahavishnu is not such a big deal for us. The gopis, when they saw Vishnu, they said, where's Krishna? Please tell us, Prabhu, where's Krishna? So Advaita is Mahavishnu. It's important for us to understand something of, how everything happened. But for us, a bigger deal is Advaita as Sadashiva, as a cowherd boy. That's somebody we can play with and worship, follow in the footsteps of forever and ever. He's in Vrindavan. And he's in Nitya Navadvip, in an older form, as a respected elder. And we go to both places, and we serve him in both places. And so he's an Acharya, but not exactly like our Acharyas. He's the Supreme Lord performing pastimes in the spiritual world, which happens to look a lot like the Hare Krishna movement in its Mayapur manifestation, in its Nitya Navadvip manifestation. And that place, by the grace of the Vaishnavas and the holy name, becomes Vrindavan. It doesn't lead you to Vrindavan. It is Vrindavan with a very sweet, accessible nature. Therefore, Mayapur is the first love of all Vaishnavas. They fall in love with Mayapur, and through that they realize that they're in Vrindavan. They realize the Harinam party is the Ras Leela, not vice versa. They realize it in that order. And so Advaita was an Acharya who performed pastimes of being an Acharya in the spiritual world. You follow? And this reconciles with that he was non-different from the Lord. And the reconciliation is that he's the bhagavadgita. And with this understanding of what that means, that Nityanavadvip was non-different than Vrindavan, we can now appreciate Advaita's prem-laden, love-laden pastimes, the same way we appreciate Krishna's love-laden pastimes and don't find any discrepancy. We can appreciate Advaita's love-laden pastimes of being an Acharya and not see any discrepancy. Did you guys follow the reconciliation I was attempting? There it is. He's the Lord. But he's preaching bhakti. But what's the Lord doing in the form of a devotee in this world? He's not in this world. He's the Bhakta avatar in Nityanavadvip preaching. Making it even easier for us to step into Vrindavan. And that same mood of serving Krishna, being Krishna's devotee, that basic mood that we teach, it gradually opens up into all these possibilities. That very easy to understand and digest notion of service to Krishna, service to Lord Chaitanya. That I don't want to be the master, I want to be the servant. That very simple realization everybody can have opens up limitless possibilities. And these are the ones that enthralled our acharyas and that they offered on a platter to us for us to participate in. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you so very much on IGTV for participating.